So I met our first speaker in 2004, and one of the things I found interesting about Todd is that he explains describes his MLB career as 15 years of failing through baseball, and he's going to talk about this. He's had many challenges throughout his career while reinventing himself many times over, but his fearless passion has been the foundation of his character, his perseverance, and his continued success. I won't read you all of his accomplishments in baseball. You can find that in his bio. What I will tell you that today he's an author and a global marketing expert, but more importantly, he is a husband and proud father of 5 children. His story is not what you expect, but his passion is contagious, so prepare yourself. Please join me in welcoming Todd Stottlemyre to the podium.
Thank you, sir. 1 hour? 1 hour. So watch the time. I'll watch the time, too. How's everyone? You know, first of all, I'm grateful and honored. I'm humbled to be here. You know, Jeff called me several months ago. He says, I'm putting on an event, and he goes, and I would love for you to be the keynote speaker. I said, that's funny because I'm not a speaker. And what I am, though, I'm a businessman, I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm a storyteller. So today, I'm just going to share a few stories with you today about different pivots in my life and that sort of thing. But I said to Jeff, Jeff, what's the event about? He said, broadband, internet, telecommunications. I go, great, I know nothing about the space. I said, the only thing I know just this is if you can't get on the internet, you can't make a phone call, you can't send a text, you can't receive an email, no one wants to be there. And the only thing that I found with broadband and baseball, what connects the two and what makes them similar is if you have a bad day on the baseball field, you get booed and people are mad at you. Yes or yes? Is anybody in here a baseball fan? Holy Lord. How many of you got up at 5 a.m. with me this morning? I didn't get up because of the alarm, but I have a routine where I get up at 5 a.m. I'm in the middle of a 30-day challenge, so I apologize for smoking in the hotel and setting off the alarms. I'm just kidding, I don't smoke, but in any case, what brings broadband and baseball together? What's funny is that if you have a bad day on the baseball field, you got people frustrated. And if you can't get online, what do you have? You have people that are frustrated. So if we don't perform at the highest levels, we don't raise our standards, what happens? We leave people frustrated. We leave people frustrated with communities. We leave people frustrated with companies. We leave people frustrated with connectivity. And here's what I know. I don't want to go on vacation somewhere where I can't connect. Although I will tell you that some of my best vacations are places where I can't connect. But in any case, it's having the options. Today, guys, I just want to share with you a little bit about me, my story, and hopefully it'll resonate with some of you. Jeff mentioned I'm married to my beautiful wife, my soulmate. I am the father of 5 children. I'm 53 years old. I have a 23-year-old that has 1 semester of pre-med, and then she's going to go on to medical school. I'm so proud of her. 23-year-old daughter. I have a daughter turning 17 years old today, actually. I have a 15-year-old daughter. I have a 20-year-old son. And I have a 3-year-old daughter. And she wasn't a mistake. And yes, I'm 53. And the reason I share that with you is I just want you to know that you're hearing from someone that doesn't quit in anything he believes in. So I'm not sure I'm even finished yet. Some of you are going to catch that later. One more cup of coffee. You know where I'm at. Ladies and gentlemen, you know, I got a chance to grow up for a little boy who had a dream, and that dream was really installed and inspired by my father's career, who was a legend in Major League Baseball. He was a pitcher with the New York Yankees. back in the mid-'60s to early '70s. And Yankee Stadium became the playground for my brothers and I. And we went to the stadium every single day with my father. My father had incredible teammates. My father had teammates like Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, Whitey Ford. Yogi Berra was actually his first manager, and people like Thurman Munson, Bobby Mercer. And as kids growing up, my brothers and I were no different from every other boy in the state of New York. We all grew up wanting to be Mickey Mantle. We were no different. The difference that we had and the edge that we had over other kids was that I went to the Yankee Stadium every single day, and we used to stand out in the outfield grass during batting practice with a guy by name of Mickey Mantle. So I was very fortunate. I got an opportunity to inherit my father's environment. I got to inherit his teammates' mindsets. I got to inherit and be around people of excellence, high achievers. And it's also a place where my dream, it's where it began. And I thought, man, Dad has an incredible job. He plays the game of baseball. He calls that work. He gets paid for it. I was like, when I grow up, I want to have a job like my dad. And that dream was installed and instilled in us. And we began to dream as kids. And I was very fortunate that I got a chance to live that dream out and actually follow in his footsteps. But along the way, here's what I want you to know is we had a world or an ocean of people reminding us constantly that we weren't like our father. Matter of fact, my best friends back in middle school and high school, they were very well aware of our dream. They knew we wanted to follow in our father's footsteps. They knew we wanted to play Major League Baseball. And my friends would say, hey, Todd, what are you going to do if this thing doesn't work out for you? And I would just tell you the opinions of the world, everyone in the world saying, hey, you guys aren't like your father. Actually, what are you going to do? And even it got to a point where growing up back in Yakima Valley in the state of Washington up in the Northwest, my father's high school friend, where they grew up in a town of about 1,200 people, and his high school friend and buddy had not one athletic bone in his body, like truly, and that's okay. But what wasn't okay was, I'll never forget that morning where he showed up at our house, and it was kind of a routine where he would show up and he would have coffee with my father, and we were in high school, and I was in the living room. My father was with his friend, his childhood friend, and having coffee in the kitchen. And this guy said to my father, he says to my dad, he says, Mel, my father's name is Mel. He says, Mel, he says, are you maybe setting your kids up to fail? And my father was like, in a little bit of disbelief, and he says, well, what do you mean by that? He says, well, let's face it. They're not like you. They don't have the talent that you had. They don't have the mindsets that you have. They don't have the temperament that you have. And if this whole thing of Major League Baseball and your kids playing Major League Baseball, it doesn't work out, well, don't you think you might be setting them up for disappointment? That opinion came from someone that knows nothing about Major League Baseball. That opinion came from someone that doesn't have any athletic ability. Now, I was in high school, and I was in the living room, and I heard the whole conversation. Imagine being a high school kid, have an adult tell your father, are you setting your kids up for disappointment because they're not going to make it and they're not like you? And I remember I hollered from the living room, and I'm like, hey, I can hear you in there. Like, hello? But isn't that the world we live in, where everyone's got an opinion about how we should live or how we should act or what our government should do, what our community should do, and this and that? So it didn't stop, but it also didn't stop us, because our dream was bigger than the opinions and critics of other people. And in 1988, my first year, coming out of spring training, where the manager told me I was going to be the fifth starter in Toronto, I just remember I was like so overwhelmed with joy. And this dream that this thought of following in my Father's footsteps, for 20 years, I have dreamed about this moment. And then this moment is all happening. And he tells me I made the major league team coming out of spring training, and I was like, wow. And I was 21 years old at the time, almost 22 years old, and to make it, and it's like, it was a dream come true, but making it was only one thing. Being good enough to stay in the league was another. In August, after going 4-8, I had an ERA of 5.5. I was probably the worst pitcher in baseball in 1988. And they sent me back down to the minor leagues. And when they sent me back down to the minor leagues, I was so happy because I was miserable. And the reason I was miserable is because you're paid to perform and you're paid to win, and I wasn't winning. And I would tell you that I was booed out of a lot of stadiums, those stadiums being our home stadium in Toronto. People were upset. We weren't performing. So got called back 30 days later. Last day of the season, the general manager calls me up to his office, and he has a sit-down conversation. I'm excited to be we're preparing to go home for the winter. Going to do some traveling. I'm going to enjoy the outdoors with my mom and my dad and my brothers and friends from back home. And, you know, I'm thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas and all the time off. And our general manager says, Todd, he says, we need you to go play. We need you to go to winter ball, and we need you to learn how to throw a new pitch. So even though we broke through all the percentages of doubt, and even though the percentages of playing Major League Baseball aren't very high, at the highest level, they were telling me, in order for you to be successful at this level, you need to go learn a new skill, you need to go learn a new pitch. And I said, great. And he said, winter ball. And I thought, Arizona, maybe Florida, that's okay, that'll be cool. And I said, well, where do you want me to go? And he says, we want you to go to Barquisimeto, Venezuela. I still can't spell Barquisimeto. That was in 1988, and I said, okay. And I said, so I'm going to go to South America. They said, yeah. Now, Pat Gehrig, at the time, our general manager, is a former agent of the FBI. So he could get me a passport like within about 2 seconds. And I was like, well, I don't have a passport. And I thought that was my way out. He goes, don't worry, we're taking care of that for you right now. And I said, well, I'm going to go home. And he says, no. We need you to fly to Miami tomorrow. We need you to wait there for your passport, and then you'll fly into South America. And I was like, wow. Now here, I had to make a massive sacrifice. And at that time, I was going to be giving up my winter, giving up Thanksgiving, giving up holidays with my family, giving up time off. But that sacrifice at that point of my life was really small compared to how big my dream was. Because the last thing he says, Todd, the only way you can make our club next year in 1989 is if you go to winter ball and you develop a new pitch, because you need another pitch to compete at this level. I said, I'm in. I can't wait to get to South America. That was 1988. They were in the middle of a presidential election. It was a little wild in Venezuela at that time, hanging around Barquisimeto and Caracas and some of those places. I came back for spring training in 1989. Midway through spring, I'm having the best spring of my life. Our manager, Jimmy Williams, walks up to me in the outfield grass. He says, Todd, you're having a great spring. You're really making it tough on us. I was like, what do you mean I'm making it tough on you? And I was like, I thought I was making it easy on you, like I'm performing at higher levels than I've ever performed. And what I realized is the club didn't have a lot of plans for me at that time, and I'm going to have to continue to persist through it. Ended up making the club in 1989. I was kind of a swing guy. Started sometimes, was in the bullpen sometimes. And right there in the middle of May, I'm at my apartment. I'm with our catcher. I'm rooming with him. Pat Borders was the 92 MVP of the World Series. We're roommates. And our manager fired Jimmy Williams. Now, I felt bad for Jimmy because Jimmy is a great man, great baseball man. But I remember being at the apartment and thinking to myself, now, this might be my break. Maybe new manager, maybe I'll get more playing time and carry on. And I couldn't wait to get to the stadium. and they had hired Cito Gaston as our intern manager. And I get to the ballpark, and Cito calls me into the office, and I go in, and I'm sure he's going to be telling me he's going to insert me into the starting rotation, and I'm going to pitch every 5 days, and I'm going to be going on with my career. I just feel like I'm going to get to pitch more. And I was right. I'm going to pitch more, except for Cito told me I wouldn't be pitching in Toronto, that I was being designated and sent back down to the minor leagues. That was a pivot for me because I was frustrated. And I was mad, I was frustrated, I was disappointed. I was going back to the minor leagues. My dream was to play Major League Baseball. I was now being challenged again with the thought, am I even good enough? There were lots of critics. There were lots of reports, lots of reporters, lots of fans, lots of friends going, what are you going to do now? And for the first time in my life, and it's the only time in my life, at that point, I started to wonder, am I good enough? Was the world right? I started to have doubt. But in my frustration, I also played victim. Now, I don't know if anyone in this room has ever played victim to not hitting a goal. I don't know if anybody ever said, well, it's because of this and because of that. We won't achieve something. But here's at that time, my father was a pitching coach for the New York Mets. I called my most trusted advisor. I called Dad, and I said, Dad, and I played victim. I played spoiled baby. I played brat. I said, Dad, I can't believe this. I just got sent back down to the minor leagues. And I said, I said, Dad, I said, you know, I play for the Toronto Blue Jays. I said, you know, up here in Canada, they're a hockey country. Like, what the hell do they even know about baseball anyway? I started to blame the country for my lack of success. I blamed the city of Toronto. I blamed the manager. I blamed the general manager. I blamed the pitching coach. I was whining and complaining at 23 years old. I was a spoiled baby playing victim. I played victim. See, what I wasn't doing was taking responsibility. And as I'm blabbing and as I'm going through it, my father never said a word, but the second I paused, my dad said, you know, Todd, we would love to have you as a starting pitcher here in New York. And I'm like, yeah. And then he goes, but not the way you're pitching today. Dad, is Mom around? See, I didn't want to hear it. I was so busy blaming others for my lack of success. The last thing I wanted to hear was the truth. And I trusted my dad. And I was like, wow. I hung up the phone. It was time to pack up my place in Toronto. It was about a 6.5 hour drive to Syracuse, New York from the city of Toronto. Packed up all of my stuff, loaded it in the car. I left Toronto, the city of Toronto, about midnight that night. It was a lonely drive, no music, nothing on in the car, just me. It was desperately quiet. Many times I pulled over thinking, why even go to Syracuse, New York? All of my friends have now made it through college. They have jobs, they're on to their careers. Here I am chasing this dream. And at that moment, I would just tell you I was so vulnerable because self-doubt started to take over my body. I started to wonder. I wonder if the world's right. I wonder if the critics are right. I wonder if everyone else is right and I'm the one that's wrong. And all of my friends who are now through college and all having careers, how far behind am I going to be of them? And what a laugh I'm going to be when I get home. And there were many times and I would be like, nah, I'm going to give it one more shot. And I would continue down the road and I would pull off in the middle of the night to take a break. And I'd be like, is this all a big waste of time? And I got to tell you, it was a seesaw battle that night. And part of me was like, I leaned to the right and I was like, is this over? Is it time for me to move on and grow up and go get a real job? And then the other part of me would lean back to, my childhood in Yankee Stadium, standing in the outfield grass with Mickey Mantle, and hanging out with Yogi Berra in the dugout. And as I went through the seesaw battle, I pulled into MacArthur Stadium as the sun was rising. And as I pulled into the stadium because I had no place to go, I had no place to stay. I pulled into the stadium, I leaned my seat back. Parking lot was empty, sun's rising. I made a decision at that moment. And my decision was, at that time, I'm going to go all in. I'm just going to go all in. And if I fail, I'll fail in front of the world, and I'm going to be okay with that. But if I win, I'll win in front of the world. But either way, I'm just going to go all in. I'm going to be the first one to the stadium. I'm going to be the last one to leave. I'm going to do everything I can every single day. I'm going to have the mindset, somehow, some way, I got to learn something every day, and I have to get better, and I need to raise my standards, and I need to take more responsibility for all of my actions. And I just went all in. I went all in, and here's what I would tell you. I couldn't see around the corner. And 30 days later, I got the call back to Toronto. That year, I went on to pitch the second half as a 23-year-old. I was the youngest Blue Jay in the history of the franchise at that time to pitch into a playoff game. I pitched Game 2 against the A's. I went on 15 years later, landed on 3 World Championship teams. I was overpaid 15 consecutive years. Anybody interested in being overpaid in the room? Like, I was overpaid by tens of millions of dollars over my career. I got a chance to play for Hall of Fame managers like Tony La Russa. I got a chance to hang out with Hall of Famers and share in the uniform and the spirit of the game with people like Dave Winfield, Paul Molitor, Randy Johnson, Curt Schilling, Rickey Henderson, Dennis Eckersley, Dave Stewart, Bobby Welch. I could go on and on. Most of those guys today are in the Hall of Fame. So I would have missed out on 15 seasons because here's what I want you to know. That time in 1989 when I got sent down back to AAA, I was this close, guys. I want you to know something. I was this close. How close? This close. This close from what? From walking away from a dream that I had been carrying with me for 2 decades that started in Yankee Stadium, and being this close from walking away and making excuses for why it didn't work out and playing victim. I would have missed out on playing with Hall of Famers. I would have missed out on 3 world championships. I would have missed out on tens of millions of dollars. And none of that was even the big deal of it all. See, because if I would have quit at 22 years old, what story would I tell you today? What story would I tell my kids when they have a dream? And because I didn't quit, I tell the story today that actually dreams do come true for the people who persist. Here's what I know. The highest achievers in the world never change their mission. They may change their strategy. They may have to adapt. They may have to change with times. And it's crazy. I mean, think about it. I know nothing about broadband. Zero. But here's what I would tell you. It was so awesome last night being able to connect into Hong Kong through FaceTime, where last night, because of technology, because of the people in this room, because of you, your companies, the people before you, I'm able to live out a whole nother dream today. And that is to try to make an impact around the world, inspiring people to dream. How many of you, I'll give you an example. How many of you, and there's nothing wrong with the question or your answer, but how many of you had a dream as a kid by a raise of hands? I mean, that's it? No one wanted to be Spider-Man? Wonder Woman? Let me ask the question again. How many of you had a dream when you were as a kid? You wanted to do something like whatever, right? How many of you lived that exact dream out? The exact one. Handful of you. Congratulations. How many of you have a dream today? I got to tell you something that I think it's awesome that most of you raised your hand, because I got to tell you something. You know what I realized from traveling around the world? Most people who have given up on a dream, because they bought into the opinions of other people based on how they think and how they dream. And let's look, here we are, we're at a conference where we can connect with people around the world. And at some point prior to this conference, someone had to have that dream, yes or yes? You know, so after living out my childhood dream, I was 37, retired from Major League Baseball. It was time to grow up. I actually got a job. I went to work for a Wall Street firm. I built an asset management team. 5 years after that, I launched my own investment fund. Then we built 19 different companies from the ground up. We went through a recession. It was difficult, but it's part of business. And then 2.5 years ago, my life changed all over again. And you see, my father, Mel Stottlemyre, in 1999 was diagnosed with a cancer called multiple myeloma, a blood cancer. And at the time that he was diagnosed in 1999, 19 years ago, they told him they gave him 3 years to live. So the doctor that diagnosed him gave my father 3 years to live. My dad said, I'm going to go find a new doctor. Because he goes, I don't like what you think about the rest of my life. I want to go find someone that wants to bet on me living. I want to go find a doctor that's willing to bet on me, that says, hey, we'll give it everything we've got, and we'll take it day by day, because that was my father's mindset. See, my father wasn't interested in the death sentence of 3 years. So he got a different doctor, and 2.5 years ago, and after he went through a stem cell treatment where they take his marrow from his body. They do the cleanse, they put him in a bubble, they put the marrow back into a system, and he went about a decade, 12 years, remission, doing great. And then about 5-6 years ago, the cancer fought its way back into the body. It started to learn from the chemo, and actually the cancer started to change. And they began treating it again. They put my dad in a trial, and different drugs and this and chemo, and putting all these different drugs and this cocktail together to try to battle the cancer, keep my dad alive, and try to do everything they could to give him a quality of life. And he went through a rough spell. Matter of fact, in 4 years, he was 911 to a hospital more than 40 times. Today, my father is 76 years old, but 2.5 years ago, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. My mom and dad live up in Seattle. I'm driving down the 101, headed north on the freeway. I get a call from my mother. It's a frantic phone call. That frantic phone call says, you need to get here right now. She goes, Dad's not well. We had to take him to emergency. I found him on the bathroom floor because the dog woke me up. His blood pressure was 57/30. He was basically dying. Got him to the hospital, called 911. Paramedics came, got him up, got him out, got him to the hospital. I'm driving down the 101. I call my wife. I said, I'm going right to the airport. I get off on the off-ramp. I said, find a way to get me a flight from Phoenix to Seattle as fast as you can. She gets me a flight. I get to the airport. I said, where am I going? She says, American. I said, great. I get to the gate. I get on an airplane. I land in Seattle. I have no idea what kind of condition my father will be in, or even if he'll be alive. I rush to the cancer hospital. I walk in. He's running a fever of 105. He's delirious. He wasn't quite sure what decade he was in, and he didn't recognize me, his own son. And I got to tell you, it was difficult. And it was difficult to watch the guy that was your mentor, your coach, not just your father, but he became really my best friend through life. And it was hard because I carried my father around on a pedestal my whole life. I looked up to him. I admired him. I respected him. He inspired me as a child to dream and to go for it. And then here he was, laying in a hospital bed, me walking in, and he didn't even recognize me. And I'm going to tell you, personally, it was difficult. 3 days later, he led our family out of that hospital. Not in a wheelchair, refused the wheelchair, walking in front of the family. The doctors were in disbelief. The family was in disbelief. And he was on the move again. And the doctors were like, we don't even know what to say other than he made a miraculous turnaround. That was 2.5 years ago. We get to his house that night, or that day, and my father looks at me. He goes, will you take me for a drive in the mountains? I said, man, Dad, I'd love to. And I jump into his truck. He jumps into the passenger side. We're going up through Snoqualmie. It's beautiful, Snoqualmie Falls in the mountains, beautiful log homes. My father says, you know, these homes up here, Todd, are amazing. I said, yeah, they're nice, Dad. Hey, and they're log homes. He says, you know, maybe someday I'll buy a log home up here in the mountains. He said, maybe someday I'll buy a home up here in the mountains. I don't know what I said to him. I know what I was saying on the inside. Like, Dad, I just want you to get through today. You know what I realized? I realized that my father, like I'm sure some of you in the room either have a family member or a friend or something that's going through, you know, some kind of circumstance that, you know, you wouldn't wish on your enemy. And what I realized at that moment is my father had grueling circumstances, but refused to give any attention or any power over his current circumstances. He refused it. See, because my father was still casting vision of someday living in the mountains, where 3 days prior to that, it didn't look like he was going to ever make it out of the hospital. And that night, guys, that night it's 3 a.m. in the morning, I'm staring at the ceiling. I'm like, how can this be? And I was being inspired like never before. And what I realized at that moment was that you can't pick your parents, but if I could, I would have picked my dad to be my dad. I would have picked my mom to be my mom. You can't pick your parents. And when you're a child and you're growing up, you can't pick your environments. But man, I got to tell you something. Having Yankee Stadium as a playground was pretty cool. You can't pick the associations of your parents, but I got to tell you, hanging out with Mickey Mantle was a dream come true before the dream was even alive. And I was like, here I was, and what I realized was that our family had gone through tragedy and triumph, both ends of the angle. You know, we went through times like when I was 15, I gave my little brother a bone marrow transplant. He was 11. He never made it out of the hospital. He died of leukemia, went into a coma. My transplant basically put his body into a coma that he never came out of. So when I left that hospital that day, I left not just with traditional sadness, but I left with guilt and I left with anger, and I felt like I just murdered my little brother because it was my marrow that killed him. And at 15, that's kind of tough to overcome, and it took me decades to be able to overcome and to regain the mindset that I didn't kill my little brother. But at this moment with my father, what I realized was all the lessons. And every time I was struggling in baseball, that I reached out to my father, or I had Hall of Fame managers like La Russa, or great pitching coaches like Duncan, or great teammates like Dave Stewart. Every time I was in a place of struggle or pain, I had a group of people around me that poured into me, that helped me catapult to the next level and to learn and to grow from it, to go from one level to the next level. But at this moment, what I realized is all the life lessons that I'd received for my benefit, for my success, for me to achieve what I wanted to achieve, I had never passed those lessons on to someone else. And at this very moment, where my father wouldn't give in to his circumstances, I made a decision. And life is about making decisions. And what I realize is that where we all sit today, you sit with the mindset, with the achievement, with the bank account, with the lifestyle, with the job, with the company, with the government. You sit where you sit based on how you think, the decisions you've made, the people you've been around your life, and the actions you've taken up till right this moment. It's landed you and all of us exactly where we are. all the experiences. And I made a decision at that time. It's like, I'm gonna go through the second half of my life sharing the stories, just sharing stories with people, so that I can help maybe relate to someone who might be in a place of pain or struggle, that might be going through some grueling circumstances, where my experiences, my past experiences, might be able to help them through. And I was like, I'm going to make the second half of my life all about other people and make an impact. I remember I got home, I walked in the kitchen, I flew back to Arizona. I said to my wife, I'm going to write a book. And she said, dear God, help us. She goes, Todd, you know it's the funniest thing in the world? She goes, people pay you to speak and you don't even pronounce words right. You make up words. You don't even speak proper English. And she goes, and now you're going to write a book? I said, yeah, hon. I said, I want to share stories. I want to share about the death of my little brother. I want to share about I almost quit on my dream. I want to share it with people. I want to keep people from quitting and giving up on their dream. I want to encourage people to continue to raise standards. I want to encourage governments to continue to raise standards. Not to make excuses, not to play victim, to take 100% responsibility so that we can all lock arms and so that when we're done with life, right, the idea is in our last hour we look back and never say, I wish I would have or I could have. But when we get to the last hour of our life, what if we could get to that last hour going, I'm ready because I'm exhausted because I played the game of life the way I should have, and that was all out. And at this moment that I'm going to write this book, and I said to my wife, I said, don't worry about my English and my grammar because I'm not even properly educated. I said, I'll get an editor. And my English is so bad, I got two editors, one to edit the other editor, just to make sure. I said, look, I got the stories. I just need to put it together the right way. And I wrote this book, and the book started out was just stories, just telling life stories. And I got to the end of it, and the publisher says, you just created a 9-point achievement system. I'm like, I did? He says, yeah, let's walk through this. See, it starts with a dream, a goal. And it doesn't matter if you're in broadband or baseball, you got to figure out the handful of things that are going to create the biggest success. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is, what the industry is. Success always boils down to a handful of things. You can't fight it because I can prove it. And you know this because you're a lot smarter than I am. And as I went through the achievement system, one of my favorites in the world was chapter 5 called Fighting the Enemy. That's the obstacles get in the way of our achievement. It could be other people's opinions, right? It could be budgets could get in our way. It becomes an enemy. Any obstacle that keeps you from performing at the highest levels, those obstacles I call fighting the enemy. Do you guys know what the number one dream killer is in the world? Fear. Fear. Sometimes we're afraid to dream. We're afraid to voice our dreams because we're fearful of what the person sitting next to us might think about us. Because we're so busy being busy, just fitting in. And my wife says, you're going to be so good at this because you're going to make some people mad. You're going to aggravate. She goes, I said, well, why would you say I'm going to be good at this if I'm going to make some people mad? She goes, well, you've been booed by 50,000. You don't really give a damn what people think about you anyway. I was like, wow, you're so encouraging. But fear. Think about fear for a second. I'm not talking about the fear of jumping out of an airplane. Like I never figured that out anyway, who would jump out of an airplane that's actually working. But it's the kind of fear that keeps you from becoming the best version of yourself because you're worried about your current associations, what they might think of how you think. That's fear. The best story I could ever tell you on fear was in 1995 when I got traded to Oakland Athletics. And I remember we were in a pitcher's meeting, and Dave Duncan, our pitching coach, is a genius in the space. So I'm sure there are geniuses in this room, in your space. There's a lot of geniuses in here. Well, the genius as a pitching coach in my space was a guy by the name of Dave Duncan. And we're in this pitcher's meeting. And in this pitcher's meeting, he looked across the room to a Hall of Famer. His name was Dennis Eckersley. Saved over 400 games. He had won over 200 games. He was an MVP of the league. He was an MVP of a World Series. He was a world champion. He had thrown a no-hitter. In games he pitched, the team had won more than 600 different times in his career. I'm like, that's mind-boggling when you step back from that. Games he performed in major leagues, the team had won over 600 different times. The guy was a legend. Dave Duncan looks across and he said, Dennis, he says, and we had a young pitching staff. He said, Dennis, he says, what drives you? And Dennis said, fear. And I was like, confused. I'm a starting pitcher. He's the closer. And then Dave said, can you talk about that? He says, yeah, when I come into the game in the ninth inning, I'm scared to death. I'm like, holy crap. I'm going to go be the starting pitcher, pitch a game, hand the ball to our closer, to a scaredy cat, right? I'm like, man, I hope you do well. I know you're scared to death. Go get him. I was like, and here this guy is a legend. And he just admitted to the entire staff that when he goes into the game, and then he said, listen, I'm scared. Because I know the team up to that point. I know that they've given it everything they had for 8 innings. And I know that if I do my job, we win. But if I don't do my job, we lose. After everybody had worked so hard, and the starting pitcher worked hard, and everybody worked hard for the win, he says, you see, if I fail, we lose. And that scares me. And I'm like, whew. I'm still trying to get over this whole thing. And then Duncan says, well, how do you overcome it, Dennis? And this is where I became a detective, and I said, I can't wait to hear what this guy's got to say. Because he better say something good, because now I'm scared to give the ball to him. Like, I need something good coming out of your mouth at this moment. He says, the more fear I have, the more aggression I take towards the fear. Most people, not everyone, and this is a room of achievers and achievement and vision. But most people, what I realized is where there's fear, it paralyzes most people to take an action. Yes or yes? It keeps people from moving forward. Fear can either paralyze you, or fear will either paralyze or propel you to take more action. Let me say that wherever you're uncomfortable, you need to run towards that. That's where the growth lies. And I got to tell you something. Last night, hanging out with you guys at the reception dinner, you know, we got a bunch of smart people in here, properly educated, speak great English, talking about fiber optics. I'm like, I'm not even sure where those are located. I had one guy telling me about the cloud, and how they analyze data in the cloud. And I looked up. He goes, no, not that cloud. And I got to tell you something. An athlete hanging out with this intellect, with this group of achievers, it's uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. So I went to the bar. I said, maybe I'll drink some fluid. It'll give me more courage. Jeff he'd see me by myself, and I'm like, no, man, I'm just working. Don't worry about me. But really, I was afraid to kind of have a conversation with you guys. Your keynote speaker was scared to death of you guys last night. And I met this gentleman, and he made me comfortable. because he made me feel welcome. But in order for me to meet him, I had to go approach because they were in a conversation. And I just walked up to the table. But he says that because I can't just preach it and teach it, I got to live it. And here I am. I don't know anyone other than Jeff, and he's got work to do. And I'm like, I got to get out of my comfort zone and just go meet people. And what was incredible was we realized that we had some things in common outside of our professions, that it didn't just have to be about. So I'll just tell you, sir, thank you for making me feel comfortable last night. You're awesome, boss. Give him a big hand real quick, right? Will you guys do a little test with me? Now, it's a pretty big room, and I think there's room to do this, but I want to show you something in closing. So can you guys all stand real quick for me? Now I need you to put your feet together. Now I learned this. And when I learned this at a conference from a guy who teaches everything about the brain and your mind and how it works and that whole neuroscience, right? I can't spell that either. And I was like so fascinated because he made this statement that he teaches professional teams, athletics. He teaches this. And I was like, wow, this is so powerful. So with your feet together, you got them together, and I need to point straight out in front of you, right? Okay, I need you to take your right arm, and I need you to put it right out in front of you like this. Now, I don't want you to get hurt, so be careful. All right, you ready? What I want you to do is I want you to turn with your feet staying in this. Your feet can't turn this way. I need you to keep your feet just like this, and I want you to turn. And I want you to go as far as you can go. And as you turn and you get as far as you can go, I want you to go as far as you can go. I need you to keep your feet straight forward. I want you to go as far as you can go, and I want you to look and see where your hand is pointing. I want you to look, and I need you to lock it in exactly where your hand is pointing. Have you gone as far as you can go? All right, now come on back. Now I need you guys to do me a favor. If you could just give me 1 minute. Just 1 minute. I want all of you to close your eyes. I want you to keep your feet right where they're at. I want you to close your eyes. Here's what I want you to do with me. I want you to visualize yourself turning, just like I asked you to turn. But I want you to go 25% further in your mind right now. As you're turning, you got to that place that you just got to, but then you continue to go and you went 25% further. I need you to visualize and see yourself go 25% further in your mind. Now I want you to go 50% further than you did the first time. I need you to see yourself turn all the way around in your mind. I want you to feel it. I want you to turn all the way around in your mind. And then I want you to turn all the way around in your mind a second time. I know it sounds crazy. I need you to stay with me. Now I want you to do it a third time. You went around and around and around in your mind. Can you picture it? I want you to see it. I want you to feel it. Now I want you to open your eyes. I want you to open your eyes. I want you to keep your feet right where you're at. I want you to take your right arm up. I want you to put it out in front of you. Now I want you to go as far as you can go. I want you to go as far as you can go. How many of you, by a raise of hands, went further the second time? Wow. Give yourselves a hand. Have a seat. You told me the first time you went as far as you can go. I took 2 minutes of your time. We went and did a mental exercise, and you went further. Here's my question to you. How many other times in life has your mind said, that's it, when you had so much more in you? How many times have you said, I can't make another call, I can't wire another building, I can't do another thing, I can't make another speech, I can't go another step, I can't do another meeting, I can't go to another conference? How many times has your mind shut you down when yet you could have done so much more? See, I want you to think about it. You went the first time as far as your mind would allow you to go, until I opened up your mind and you went further. And that took 2 minutes. Now, what if you opened up your mind to go further for the rest of your life? Can you imagine what this place, with these people, what we could achieve, all of us working together, if we will just not stop when our mind tells us that's it? Because you have so much in you. Matter of fact, the average person today only lives 40% of their capability, that most people never enter into the 60% part. I'm not going to offend anyone, but I was here a short period of time before I entered this stage. And before I entered the stage today, and look, this is not going to be very popular, what I'm getting ready to say. Are you guys okay with it? Are you sure? Some of you are like, you just want me to open up my big mouth, right? This isn't going to be very popular. Before I even got on the stage, we talked about not hitting a goal. How come? How come? We talked about not hitting the goal in this state. How come? Has our mind stopped us from hitting the goal? For a 2020 goal? Hold on a minute. What year is this? It's 2018. We're already giving up on 2020? What in the hell is going on in Colorado? What's going on? I mean, think about it. What happens to us? What happens to us? Let me tell you something. You can achieve 1 year of results in 1 month with the right focus, with the right mindset, with the right energy. Let me leave you with this. There's going to be 5 elements to your success. There's going to be 5 elements to your reality in closing. One is how you think. How are we thinking? How do we think today? As you come to this conference, what do you think? What outcome do you want? How do you want to raise your standards? How do you want to become best in the world at what you do? How you think. That's one of the elements of our reality. Second, number 2, is how do we feel about how we think? The third element is what do we say? You know what's so funny? You can't be one way and speak another. It doesn't work. So how you think, how you feel, right? What words do we use? Because words are power. Whatever you say and whatever you put out there, be prepared to live it. Number 4, who you associate with. Let me give you a big hand, all of you, and how grateful I am to hang out with such greatness and excellence and people that are caring, that want to make a world a better place by connecting. So it's your associations, number 4. Number 5, nothing happens until you do. What are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about the way we think? What are we going to do about the way we feel? What are you going to do about it? You know, driving here, guys, driving here from Denver, fly from Phoenix to Denver, I drove here. Jeff told me it was 2 hours. It took me 3.5 hours. I was like, and I used technology to guide me. Now, technology wasn't wrong. I guess there was a fire somewhere. I mean, some of you I know had the same issue. And I got to tell you something. I was grateful because I really had nowhere to go. I was grateful because I got to see some beautiful country. But on my drive, something happened. On my drive, my phone started buzzing. There was an alert. Anybody else get the Amber Alert yesterday in Colorado? How'd you feel? What'd you think when you got the Amber Alert? You know what I thought? I got 5 children. My first thought was a bad thought. I'll admit it to you. I was like, whoever stole that child needs to die right now. That was my first thought. My second thought was I was grateful it wasn't one of my children. Pretty selfish. My third thought, I'm coming to a place to speak at a conference because of people just like you. That Amber Alert went off, and that child has a chance because of technology. And today, and over the next couple of days, there'll be decisions made. Some of you will draw the line in the sand and says it's just not right, and it's just not healthy that when communities don't have the connectivity. Because when they don't have the connectivity, there is no Amber Alert. So if we don't do our jobs and we don't connect communities and we don't connect the world, and the people in here don't raise the standards and push the envelope on this whole thing, if we don't push the envelope as a group, we're going to fall short. And what will we say after we fall short? Would it be good enough? So let me challenge all of you to continue to do the great work. And let me say that my goal in life today, as I depart and bring Jeff back up, is just to continue to raise my standards. Which is why that I'm actually in the middle of a 30-day challenge where I didn't get up because of the fire alarm. I'm actually waking at 5 a.m. I was challenged a year ago to get up at 5 a.m. You know what I realized? At 5 a.m. in 1 second, when my feet hit the ground, I've already achieved a goal while most people are sleeping. And then I close every day out with 4 different questions, and I'll give you one of them. I close every day out today with what are 5 things I'm grateful for. And here's what I'm going to tell you. It's hard to be grateful and stressed at the same time. It's hard to be grateful and angry at the same time. It's hard to be grateful and sad at the same time. And you know what I've noticed over the last while I've gone through this 30-day challenge of getting up at 5 a.m. and closing myself out with key questions every day because I want to continue to get better and I want to raise my standards. I want to do everything I can to pursue my human potential, is by closing the day out by the 5 things and by being grateful. You know, I've slept like a baby. Because you don't sleep when you're stressed. You don't sleep when you're angry. And just by doing that one little thing, look, if in any way that any of you want to connect with me, my website is toddofficial.com. I'd love to connect with you. There's some gifts there that we give away to the people that connect with us. I'm doing everything I can to encourage and help people that are in places of pain and struggle, and just trying to encourage people to dream like they've never dreamed before. I'm grateful. I'm honored. It's been a blessing for me to be here. Thank you for taking me out of my comfort zone and allowing me to grow. And have a great conference, and let me bring Jeff back to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thanks.